Well, good morning. Good morning, everybody. I'm Morton Blackwell, president of the Leadership Institute, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this, our March Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. We live in interesting times, as anybody who was watching TV last night uh, can testify. I'd be interested. How many people watched election returns last night on the television? Yeah, almost everybody. Almost everybody. Well, I had been working very hard for the previous several days, and in fact, I'd been here at the office working until after midnight for the previous 3 nights, and so I was dog tired. And I had yesterday afternoon done a 1 hour teletown hall where we called out to donors and asked them to join us. And we got the count. We actually had 5,000 of our Leadership Institute donors on that call. So that was certainly rewarding. But last night, I went to bed at 8:40 p.m. Because I was just pooped. However, my mind was churning about the election results, and so at about 11:45, I woke up and I turned on the TV and watched it. Well, we really do live in interesting times, and I thought I would make just a few remarks about the presidential nomination race. One thing which is for sure is that nobody predicted the course of the presidential nomination contest thus far in this election cycle. There have been surprises after surprises that nobody had predicted. And at some point, we will reach the set of circumstances where it will be possible to predict what is happening. I don't know that we have reached that point yet where it's possible for somebody to predict. There are so many factors in play that I think it is likely that there will be more unpredictable surprise turns. I told that to a friend of mine yesterday who's the chairman of the Republican National Committee's Standing Committee on Rules. He's from Arizona, and I told him that I expected more surprise turns and that the races were unpredictable, and he emailed me back, well, what do you foresee is going to happen? I said, if I could foresee it, it wouldn't be unpredictable. In 2012, the Leadership Institute has already trained 2,290 students. We are, I believe, training at the highest rate at this point in the year of any previous year. And since 1979, the Leadership Institute has trained over 105,414 people. You have before you our schedule for 2012. I urge you to take a moment and review those yellow or goldenrod sheets in front of you. Review the schools and consider attending one or sending some friend or ally to one of our schools. I now have the pleasure of presenting to you my assistant, Kathy Graham, who will offer an invocation and a pledge of allegiance. Kathy does a wonderful job for me, and her job principally is to keep me out of trouble, which she does very well. She is from the great state of Texas. Kathy, would you come and offer an invocation and lead us in the pledge?
part of my prayer is adapted from the Valley of Vision of Puritan Book of Prayers. Will you please bow with me? O God, all-sufficient, you have made and uphold all things by the word of your power. Darkness is your pavilion. You walk on the wings of the wind. All nations are nothing before you. One generation succeeds another, and we hasten back to the dust. The heavens we behold will vanish away like the clouds that cover them. The earth we tread on will dissolve as a morning dream. But you, unchangeable and incorruptible, are forever and ever. God over all, blessed eternally. Infinitely great and glorious you are. O Lord, I thank you this morning for our breakfast. I pray that you would please bless and strengthen Congressman Jordan. I ask that you would give him wisdom and courage as he serves our country. We thank you for the Leadership Institute and for Morton. I pray, God, that you would strengthen Morton today and help him to glorify you today. I ask that you would bless us this morning and our time this morning would bring honor to you. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. If you'll stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now I shall introduce to you Tyler Foote, who will give a report on Leadership Institute programs. As soon as we are out of this room, the tables and chairs will be magically rearranged, and Tyler will resume holding our Future Candidate School, our week-long school, which is going on in this room this week. Tyler's doing a great job for us. He is the Director of Political and New Media Training. He is a graduate of Center College in Danville, Kentucky. Tyler?
Thank you, Morton, and good morning, everyone. As Morton previously mentioned, we are only 3 months into the new year, and LI has already trained an impressive 2,290 students. Since our last breakfast in February, LI participated in the annual Conservative Political Action Conference held in Washington, D.C. There we offered 6 trainings ranging from public speaking, fundraising, to new media training. In a matter of only 3 days, LI trained a staggering 362 conservative activists. Adding to the success of CPAC was the record-breaking attendance at this year's job and internship fair. 525 job seekers had the opportunity to meet with 40 recruiters representing 20 conservative organizations. Speaking to the success of past job fairs, 12 of these 20 organizations looked to LI's job fair to recruit for paid full-time positions. But LI's success only begins in D.C. Our grassroots department has traveled the country from South Carolina to Arizona and in between, training 746 students in 16 training programs. Meanwhile, our international department continues to sprinkle the seeds of liberty abroad by training 702 students in places like Bolivia, Guatemala, and El Salvador. And in the coming weeks, they will be hosting the annual International School of Fundraising in London, England. It's hard to believe LI has accomplished so much in such a short amount of time. As we enter March, we have no plans of taking our foot off the pedal. To follow our accomplishments, I invite you to visit our website, Facebook page, and please follow us on Twitter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tyler. Well, we have a superb speaker who has been recognized now for a long time as a rising star in the conservative movement and in the Congress. I think it's about time to stop saying our next speaker is a rising star and just describe him as a star. And to introduce him, I present to you Abigail Alger. Abby is our Director of Digital Communications, and she is a graduate of Duke University. Step right up, Abby.
Well, I'd say that Congressman Jim Jordan needs no introduction to conservatives, but I would have then talked myself out of a job. That's good. There was some laughter. Thank you, guys. I'm here to introduce Congressman Jim Jordan. He represents Ohio's 4th District and also serves as the chairman of the Republican Study Committee, the House Caucus of Conservatives formed in 1973 to advance an economic and social conservative agenda. Congressman Jordan has certainly done that for us in advancing our principles in Congress. As an advocate for the taxpayer, I believe it's in his first year of Congress, he offered fiscal discipline amendments on the House floor to suggest ways that we could stop runaway federal spending. Since then, he's opposed tax hikes, even when they're proposed by his own party. And he's also fought for a return to fiscal sanity and discipline, including his championing of the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act last year. Congressman Jordan has been equally committed to championing family values. He has an unwavering commitment to defending life. And I found out his first bill that he co-sponsored after taking office in January 2007 was the Right to Life Act. Unsurprisingly, he was named he received the Defender of Life Award from Ohio Right to Life and was the Pro-Life Legislator of the Year from the United Conservatives of Ohio. He's also received a number of other accolades. I'll highlight just a few, and trust me, this is just a few, including the Wyrick Award for Legislator of the Year in 2011, awards from Citizens Against Government Waste, the Family Research Council, Americans for Tax Reform's Friend of the Taxpayer Award, and the Best and Brightest as judged by the American Conservative Union. Congressman Jordan was raised in Ohio, where he now lives with his wife Polly and their 4 children. And for those who didn't know, he is a wrestling champion. In high school, he racked up a record of 150-1, was a 4-time state champion, and then in college was a 2-time NCAA champion. So it's my honor to introduce Congressman Jim Jordan.
Oh, don't clap. You haven't heard me talk yet, but thank you, Abby, for that. You could sum it all up. Washed up jock politician. It's really not much to brag about, but this is not working for me. You had it set right, and I messed it up, didn't I, Morton? How's that? I don't know. Well, maybe I'll end up holding it. Always get a Democrat microphone at a conservative event, don't we? That's right. That'll be all right. Can you all hear me, right? Okay.
Well, and who said conservatives were stiff-necked?
Yeah, that's right. Good. Let me first just thank you for what the Leadership Institute, all you've supported, and Morton, the great work you do. Training. I was going to say training young people, but we went through the training a few years ago in our first year in Congress, I think, back in 07 or 08, 7. Yeah. So we certainly appreciate the impact you have on young people. You know, you think about. I said this the other day. You think about people who impacted your life. For most people, next to your parents, it was probably a coach or a teacher, an educator you met along the way. And I think about my formative years. I think about the guy who was my high school wrestling coach. Amazing guy. I tell folks this story. He was the most difficult teacher in our school. We taught chemistry and physics, and probably the most demanding wrestling coach in the whole state of Ohio. Ron McCunn passed away a few years ago. Super guy. And our wrestling room at our school, my brother's a coach at our school, is named after Coach McCunn. And there is a statement that hangs in our room, hangs in that wrestling room, that characterizes Coach. He would truly, in class or in practice, he would talk about discipline every single day. I mean, this is every day. He said, Jordan, you want to do well in my class? This is chemistry. This is not any old class. You're going to have to be disciplined about preparing the night before, reading the material, coming to class and participating in class, doing the work. It's going to take discipline to do well in this class. And in the wrestling room, it was crazy. I mean, he talked about discipline I got sick of hearing about it. He'd say, if you want to accomplish things on the wrestling mat, self-discipline is the most important character quality necessary to accomplish anything of meaning or I could still hear his voice. And there were days I would say, would that guy shut up? He's driving me crazy, because he sounded like my dad, and I get enough at home from my dad. But he has a great definition, and this actually, as I said, hangs in our wrestling room today. front and center in the wrestling room. And we have a great program. Our school actually just last weekend, we just won the state tournament for the 12th year in a row. So we had quite a wrestling tradition there. And the statement says, discipline is doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it. And basically that meant doing things coach's way when you'd rather do them your way. It meant doing things the right way when you'd rather do them the convenient way. And I've said many times in this town, that's the biggest thing missing in Washington. There's not enough people willing to do things the tough, right, proper way, and looking to always do things the convenient way. And so that kind of message that is getting imparted to young people, not only on a how to win campaigns and how to handle the media, but those just basic values. We appreciate that so much. What you're doing here. Let me just make a couple comments, and I'll take some questions because I kind of need to get back. We're having a special conference this morning at 9 o'clock on this transportation bill, which, as you might guess, I'm not too enthused about. So I want to be in conference and maybe speak. I don't speak all that often in conference, but you try to, when you decide to speak, make it worthwhile. And today may be one of those days where I decide to speak. So I want to be there. Let me just set a kind of a general context for where we're at and then take your questions. 4 months ago, Polly and I had the opportunity to travel to Israel. We were there for our second time in about 3 years. And one of the things, it was amazing how to be there, by the way. We were there the week that the IAEA announced that Iran was close. Met with the Prime Minister the very day that they made the announcement. So it was a special time to be there. I was there with 5 other members of Congress and their spouse. And one of the things that we took from that trip, it didn't matter whether you were talking with people in the government, talking with leaders in the private sector, every single person made this comment. They said, the best way the United States can help Israel is for America to stay strong. When America is strong, we're better, we're safer, things are better. And I thought about that, and I said, that is, you can apply that in even a broader context. The world is a dangerous place, it's a scary place, but it's a less dangerous place, it's a less scary place, it is a better place when America leads. With our principles, our history, our heritage, our values, the world is safer and better when the United States of America is the economic and military superpower, just the way it is. And the other thing to keep in mind is the truth is you can't lead militarily, you can't lead diplomatically if you first don't lead economically. I mean, it's really that simple. To be the military superpower, you first need to be the economic superpower. And I would argue right now, what we are seeing from our government is policies that make it very, very difficult for us to be the economic leader, and therefore very difficult to be the military and diplomatic leader. And you can just go down the list. Tax policy, regulatory policy, energy policy, monetary policy, fiscal policy, healthcare policy. I think we're doing almost everything wrong. I mean, I've been asking the question to every group. I spoke to a group of ags, Farm Bureau folks from Ohio yesterday, and I asked them this too. I said, how many of you think it's time to throw out the tax code? And every hand in the room went up. And for those like you who didn't want to raise their hand, of course, I guess I didn't ask you all to. Everyone shakes everyone knows the tax code's broken. And you can't really fix it. It's time to, think about this. Any tax code that lets 47% of the population not pay the main tax, it's done. Get rid of it, start over. So we know the tax code's broken. We got wrong tax policy, which is not making a framework that's conducive for economic growth. Regulatory policy we know is bad. You talk to any small business owner out there and they'll say that this regulation is the uncertainty about it. It's so ridiculous, so burdensome, costs. Everyone gets that. We had a hearing a year ago, one of the first hearings in the Oversight Committee, which I get the privilege of sitting on. And we invited 5 small business owners from around the country to come in and talk about their business and the impact regulation has on their ability to do their business and grow their business. One was from our district, super guy, been a friend and supporter, Jack Busher, Busher electrical contracting company. Started his company about 25 years ago. Everyone else was the other 4 were just like Jack. All started their business 20, 25, 30 years ago, leaders in their community, super guys. Best question came near the end of the hearing. We had a freshman member from New Hampshire, Frank Ginta, who I thought asked the best question, the most compelling question. He said, all right, guys, I just want to know. He said, I'm just going to cut to the chase. You've all been successful, been in business 20, 25, 30 years, leaders in your community, helping people, employ people. He says, I just want to know one thing. If you knew then what you know now, would you have started? I thought, wow, that's a great question. If you knew back then all the hurdles and hassles and hoops the government was going to make you deal with and jump through, would you have taken the risk? Would you have done that entrepreneurial thing that Americans have been doing for 200 plus years? Would you have risked it? Would you have started your business? Every one of these guys, all 5 of them said, wouldn't do it, would not take the risk. And if that's not a sad commentary on the state of, the greatest nation in history with this entrepreneurial spirit that's just sort of part of us, that people were saying, I don't really know if I take the risk again. That's what government policies are doing. So wrong tax policy, wrong regulatory policy, most certainly the wrong energy policy. Just look at the Keystone decision, look at the fact that we got all the abundance the good Lord's blessed us with, and we're not willing to go get the oil out of the ground, the gas out. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So we got the wrong energy policy. I would argue, and this is debatable, but I would argue monetary policy, you do want a strong dollar. The monetary policy we've engaged on the last 3 years, the Fed's policies, I would argue is problematic, but I'm willing to debate that with some. But most certainly the wrong fiscal policy. I mean, this is where we spend the bulk of our time as the Republican Study Committee. We introduced the only budget that balanced last year. We will bring back another budget that balances this year. Looking to cut spending. We had the big debate last summer during the debt ceiling where we put forward a plan called Cut, Cap, and Balance. Cut spending, cap it as a percentage of our economy, and for the first time in American history, let's send a balanced budget amendment out to the states for ratification. Make the federal government do what everyone else has to do. Every family, every business, every village, every county, every state. Everyone has to balance their budget except that one entity, which, oh, by the way, has a $15 trillion debt, the federal government. So why in the world wouldn't? So this is where we all know how bad it is. And you all know that 5 months ago we crossed a line that we hadn't crossed since the end of World War II. Debt to GDP is now 1-to-1. Got a $15 trillion economy and now approaching a $16 trillion debt. That is definitely the danger zone. Happened to see David Walker at the airport 3 weeks ago, former Comptroller General, and I just asked him, I said, how much time do you think we got? And he said 2, maybe 3 years. On the current pace, I mean, it will happen. I mean, it's mathematics. It's the time value of money working in the wrong direction. It will happen if we don't change it. And it's like any other problem. The sooner you get after fixing it, the easier it is to get it done. And right now, that window just keeps shrinking. And we got people fiddling around trying to. This transportation bill is a great example. The gas tax brings in $37 billion, and we want to spend $50. And we want to say, well, we're going to pay for it. We're going to spend it over 18 months. It's the proposal last week. Spend it over 18 months. We're going to pay for it over 10 years. Such a deal, right? Yeah. That's the game that's always played in this town. And finally, I asked 2 questions last week. We were in a meeting in the whip's office, and I said, is there, of the $50 billion we're going to spend, how much of it is new contracts? They wouldn't answer the question because when you're this far in the hole, you probably don't start new things. You probably just repair what you got. That's what a family does. That's what a business does. And I also asked, I said, how much does it take just to satisfy our obligations now? Contracts we've already let, things we've already done, how much money does it take to do that? Well, we're not quite sure. Well, that's a problem. We need to know those kind of things, particularly when you got a $15 trillion debt and your debt is as big as your economy. So it's a dangerous time. And the last thing I'll say is this. It's bigger than just the economic picture. It's a cultural concern that's going on in this country, too. And this is the angst that so many voters and Americans, as you travel around the country, as I travel around our state and around the country, that you sense and you pick up from Americans. They're nervous about just this feeling that's going on and these things that are going on in our culture. And I think you could probably say the most recent example of this concern is the decision by the Obama administration, in particular Secretary Sebelius, on the attack on religious liberty. I mean, this is fundamental. We had a hearing on this. Got a lot of media attention and controversy for the failure to have a female on the first panel of witnesses, if you remember a few weeks ago. But when we had a pastor, we had a priest, a rabbi. Sounds like a start of a joke, doesn't it? On the panel. And one of the things I said at that hearing was, I said, this is even before the First Amendment. This is what America is about. The folks who left Europe, risked their lives, got on a ship, and sailed across a big ocean to come here. They came here because they wanted to practice their faith the way they felt the Lord wanted them to. Right? In Europe, they said, you got to practice your faith a certain way. And they said, no, we don't. We're going to go to America, and we're going to do it the way we think the good Lord wants us to. And they were willing to put it all in line to come here. So this is the essence of what this country is about. And here's an administration directly attacking what it means to be an American. So it's it's economic concerns, but it's also this cultural and values concerns as well. And that's what's at stake in this election. Look, this year in Congress, in my mind, the RSC's singular task is to help draw the distinction between where we want our country to go and where this administration wants it to go. Help show the contrasting visions for this country. This is a watershed election, a two different visions for America election. You know, you hear it all the time, but this is the one year it's actually true. This is the most important election in our lifetimes. So that's what's at stake, and that's what we're going to try to do as we highlight this year. I'll stop with this. I heard John Funn speak, I don't know, a few months back, and he made a great point. He said it's every third generation that has to do big things in this country. And he took us back to the founders who started it all, put it all on the line, signed that document in 1776 declaring to the world why this place would be different, why this place would really, truly value liberty and freedom. And we remember Jefferson and Franklin and Adams, but we tend to forget all the other guys who signed that document. Most of them lost everything. Lost their farm, lost their business, lost relatives, lost sons, some of them lost their own life. But they put it on the line to start this thing we call America, the greatest nation ever. 3 generations later, a group of Americans said, we're going to deal with this evil of slavery. We're going to keep the nation together when it was trying to split apart. And they succeeded. 3 generations later, a group of Americans said, we are going to deal with the Great Depression, stop the evil of Nazism, win the Second War, and they did it. And now here we are 3 generations later. And the simple fact is, it's our turn. And look, I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I did learn a long time ago, if you want to accomplish anything of meaning or significance, it's never easy. It is always hard. That's just the way the good Lord made this place. And so we got hard work in front of us, but it's worth it, because if there's not a United States of America, the world gets even more ugly and more dangerous. And that's truly what's at stake. So thank you for what you're all doing, supporting this great organization who is training young people in those values and those truths that I just talked about. God bless you, and it's good to be with you. Do we take questions? I was getting ready to ask, do we take questions? I already saw the hands up, so I understand we do. I think this one was the first one over here.
Thank you, Congressman. Speaking of things that don't work in this town, I'm a retired police detective from Lansing, Michigan. My profession's been at the war on drugs for 40 years at $1 trillion. Yeah. This year, the federal government will spend about $15 billion, 6 of which is borrowed from China. And the return on that investment so far, according to the DEA, reading their brochure, drugs are readily available to America's youth. They're also cheaper and stronger. Yeah. Can you tell me what are the advantages and benefits and good outcomes of this $1 trillion policy, which are so fantastic, that you and everybody else in Congress will vote to continue spending $15 billion, 6 of which is borrowed from China?
Yeah. The other thing that you made me think of is in my when I was in the state Senate, represented a few of the state prisons in Ohio. And when you go into, I always tell folks, you go into a prison, the first thing you realize is, well, 2 things jump out. The first was that the inmates could take over in 10 seconds. They could run the place in 10. They just couldn't get out. But they could run it. The second thing is, most of the folks in there, you can't tell any difference between the folks on the inside and the outside. They're in there, though, because of a drug problem. Either the drugs themselves put them in are the reason there, or stealing to support a drug habit. And so you're right. We need to rethink this. I think the cost to taxpayers for incarcerating nonviolent criminals is a concern and something we need to re-examine. You want to keep the really bad people, the evil people, off the streets so they can't harm others. But for folks who aren't going to harm people, we got to rethink that, and then I think save dollars. As to how we go about dealing with the problem, I think it gets back to that broader theme I talked about just a few minutes ago, and the cultural concerns. It is a values concern, and that starts in the family. That starts with the right kind of teachers and coaches making a difference in these young people's lives. And that's a long-term thing. The guy who writes about this probably the best is Cal Thomas, when he talks about sometimes our problems aren't going to be solved in Washington and in the state capitals. They're going to be solved with pastors and families and churches, and a lot of truth to that. He's also got a great line when he talks about the press. Y'all heard this line before? How the mainstream national elite national press thinks different than normal folks. And Cal Thomas says, I get up every morning, I read my Bible and the New York Times so I can see what each side's up to. Yeah. Then we'll switch sides. I'll go here and then we'll go back and forth.
On the news this morning, it was announced that for 4 straight years now, college graduates are being offered salaries lower than the year before. Yet our federal government salaries are not going down. Ireland, to try to mitigate their problem, lowered civil service pay by 22%. Is there ever any appetite in Washington to mitigate the unending increases in civil service compensation?
Yeah, there is from the Republican Study Committee. No, the budget we put forward does that. We have scaled back for every 2 people who retire. You hire 1. You gotta have less folks. You gotta cut. Our budget cuts, and we're Now think about this. This is the lack of perspective in this town. Our budget balanced. The one we put together last year balances in 9 years, and the Paul Ryan budget, which was so radical, balanced in 27 years, which is another way of saying it didn't balance, right? The president's, he never, ever, the one he introduced a month ago, that even the Washington Post said was pathetic, never, ever, ever, ever even gets close to balancing. We balance in 9 years, and we're viewed as nutcase, radical, you're 9 years? Go talk to the folks I get the privilege of representing. And they look at me like, Jordan, you big sissy, what are you doing taking 9 years? Get it done like we have to. So the perspective in this town is so skewed, so off kilter. Yeah, things like that have to happen. And here's the sad thing. If we wait much longer, then it becomes austerity. Then it becomes ugly. And this is the thing that scares me and actually keeps me awake some nights. Then there's the possibility that in the greatest nation ever, you got people in the streets, rioting in the streets when you have to do what's happening in Europe now. And that is the last thing we want. And then the implications that has on our ability to do foreign policy and the things we have to do, that's what's scary. So, yeah, we got to get after this. And it's starting to bug Americans, as it should, that their tax dollars are paying for so much higher salaries and benefits than they get to enjoy. So it has to happen. I got to try to switch sides of the rooms here and cut me off whenever we need to. Yeah. Brad, or you're in the back. Take one back there, and then we'll move the microphone up here.
Well, you just mentioned that the problems might not be solved in Washington, but by pastors. Why has there been just total silence, total abdication by the Republican Party on getting the Bible and the 10 Commandments back into public schools? Not because we need a Bible sitting on the teacher's desk, but because it would only happen as a result of a national discussion which says, yes, to solve our problems, we need God back at the center of our culture. Republicans don't mention this.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we got too many folks who I think sometimes in our party want to just like, they're sort of next question. Are you for scripture back in the schools? Yeah. Next question, please. They just want to get past it. So it's unfortunately we just have too much of that, and this whole idea that you have to run away from values debates in a campaign is I think it's just goofy. I saw where in the district I get the privilege of representing last night, Santorum won every single county, and he certainly hasn't run away from those issues. So you're right. We need more focus on it. I try to do that. The Republican Study Committee, we're about strong national defense, lower taxes, less regulation, setting an environment economically, a framework economically that's conducive to job growth, and thirdly, we are for defending traditional American values that make us great in the first place. Yeah.
One of the keys to prosperity and economic strength for America is low-cost energy. We have an administration that works against that.
I agree.
Obama saying that he will make prices skyrocket. And when he lost the battle on cap and trade, he said he will find other ways to skin the cat.
Yeah.
And he's doing that. What is the Republican Study Committee doing about this?
No, look, we're for all the above. We're for allowing drilling offshore, drilling in Anwar. I tell every group I can. I've been to Anwar, flew over it. It's the most godforsaken place you've ever seen. If you get a chance, go there. I didn't see one caribou, one polar bear. I didn't see anything but this god-awful land where there's oil underneath 75 miles from the pipeline. When you land back at the pipeline at mile marker 0, pump station number 1, you see caribou everywhere. I mean, it's just goofy. So, yeah, and you're right. This is fundamental. Tell me how you have a growing, prosperous economy if you don't have readily available energy at affordable cost. It doesn't happen. So it is you're right. It's the linchpin. You want to deal with the budget numbers we're talking about, the deficits that we've had the last 4 years, the debt we're piling up. To deal with it and ultimately begin to pay it down, to get to balance and pay it down, you cannot do it with cuts alone. There is no way. It's impossible. So you have to scale back. You got to scale back, and you got to look at saving everywhere you can. But you have to create an environment that's conducive to economic growth. And that's why I talked about taxes, regulation, energy, and monetary policy. You have to have that framework. This is what Reagan understood. You hold back spending as best you can. We're at a point where we have to cut it, and you get economic growth. And once you do that, the American entrepreneur will beat anybody if you set the right framework. This idea that I always laugh. We're going to create jobs. There ain't a politician can create any job. But what we can do, and this is what the founders understood, is you can create a framework that's conducive for entrepreneurs in the private sector to create jobs. And that's what we have to focus on.
Thank you, Congressman. I'm Chris Perkins, and my entire life is devoted to getting rid of Jerry Connolly right now in the 11th to make your life easier.
God bless you.
Hey, the president sent over his budget. It's 25 cents on the dollar borrowed right now. 48% is for entitlements. When is Congress going to go where Willie Sutton went? That's where the money is.
Yeah. Well, to Paul Ryan's credit, and Paul's been out there on the lead on this. He's exactly right. If you want to save Medicare, you have to change Medicare. If you want to save Medicaid, you have to change it. I think the way you change it is freeze it and send it to the states and let governors deal with it. And they're closer to the American people. They'll do a better job. And if you just freeze it over time, you save. In fact, we're introducing a bill today, Public Study Committee on Medicaid reform bill that does just that, freezes it, gives it back to the governors, gives it back to the states. And over 10 years, you save almost $2 trillion over the 10-year budget window. So those are the kind of things you have to, have to do. And Medicare, you have to go to a model that's consistent with America, which is a healthcare empowerment model. You're going to say to seniors, we're going to give you a scholarship, and if you're wealthy, you're going to get X. If you're not quite as wealthy, you're going to get X plus. If you're a poorer senior, you're going to get X plus plus. And you're going to use that scholarship to go into the private sector and purchase the insurance that meets your needs, that helps you and your family. That's a model that's consistent with American principles. I equate it to what we do in some urban areas. We did it in Cleveland, Ohio. One of the first things we got done when I was in the state assembly on school choice. We tell parents, we're going to give you a scholarship, and you're going to use that to get your kid the kind of education that meets their needs, helps them achieve in life. Do the same model and this is the premium support model that Paul's been talking about. So that's where we have to go on Medicare. Last one, then I got to get to this gentleman. I guess I got a minute or two.
Congressman, due to the fact that there are members of your RSC who sometimes believe that the Republican leadership in the House has a tendency to do the convenience thing rather than the right thing, I have to ask, assuming the Republicans retain their majority in the next Congress, do you foresee a leadership challenge to the speakership, the House Majority Leader, or other leadership positions?
I got to go.
I didn't ask you for your opinion. I just asked you if you
that's
see
hard.
a possibility.
Frankly, I always say it this way. The speaker and the leader, our leadership team, but certainly Speaker Boehner, let's be honest. I wish he would have pushed harder. I've said this to his face. I wish he'd have pushed harder last year, particularly in the first budget CR fight we had. More importantly, the one big thing was the debt ceiling, and we had a chance. We had a chance. I think if we'd have stuck it out, it's just the way it is. There's risk involved with accomplishing things that really have meaning. It's just the way life is. And I wished he would have pushed and held out for what we had got through the House on the cut, cap, and balance. That being said, the guy's got the toughest job in the town. I mean, think about it. He's got to deal with Harry Reid, he's got to deal with Barack Obama, and then he's got to deal with conservative guys like me. I mean, it's not easy. It is not easy. And so I give the speaker a lot of credit for how he's handled a very, very difficult task. The question, will someone challenge him? I think right now that doesn't look likely. I don't know that it would be a smart thing to do. But let's be honest, it's going to depend on what happens on Election Day. And after the Election Day, maybe we'll know more. All right. I do probably need to run here. Thank you all for the great work you're doing. Morton, thank you so much.
Thank you. Stay up here. I got a little presentation for you. Wow. Look at that. Thank you. Hey. Great. Well, thank you so much, Congressman Jordan. It's been such a pleasure to have you here. I'm sure everybody is as thrilled as I am. What a great leader you are. As a token of appreciation, I know you got to be really careful about accepting gifts, but here is a token of our appreciation, a set of Adam Smith cufflinks. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Okay. I know there's somebody here who wants to make an announcement. Are you ready? Does somebody have a microphone? Or here, you can.
Well, in the first place, I'm 92 years old between the ears, so but the point is, I have some forms here for helping Jamie Ratke get on the ballot. And as you know, yesterday there were only 2 persons on the ballot because of the law in Virginia that makes it kind of difficult to get on the ballot. So if anybody would drop by here that want to make a signature, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. The Leadership Institute, being a nonpartisan educational foundation, does not support or oppose the election of any candidate. What was being mentioned here was the matter of signing the petition to get candidates on the ballot. Signing a petition for a candidate does not imply that you are supporting that candidate. In fact, many people willingly sign petitions for a number of competing candidates. That's perfectly all right if you wish to do that. I invite you all to join us on Wednesday, April 4th, our next Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. Our guest speaker will be Dr. Milton Wolfe. You might read his excellent columns frequently in the Washington Times regularly. Dr. Milton Wolfe is a radiologist. He is a major opponent of Obamacare, and he famously is a second cousin to President Barack Obama. So you will find that, I believe, very interesting. Now, if you are interested in purchasing Adam Smith attire, such as this stylish yellow Adam Smith attire, or any of our 8 or 9 other models of ties, or cufflinks like the ones Congressman Jim Jordan walked away with, you should immediately after this breakfast go upstairs and ask for Kathy, my assistant. You'll remember she offered the prayer and led us in the pledge. And Kathy is in charge of those sales. And she'd be happy to sell you whatever you want. We also have a lovely ladies' scarves. And anyone who is interested in a tour now of the Leadership Institute building and our new annex next door, you should meet with Trey McKenzie. Here's Trey. He will give you an excellent tour of the building so you can see how the operation works, and for the many of you who are donors, you'll see what your contributions make possible. Thank you very much.